get the show on the road. Welcome, everybody. We're going to talk about automation today, and I'm thrilled to talk about this. This is something I've been thinking about presenting for quite some time. It's really all about optimizing your fundraising operation and leveraging technology to do that. So I'm going to get the show on the road. My name is Greg Warner. I am the CEO and founder of Market Smart. And if you're on LinkedIn frequently, you'll probably see me because I do post a lot. And if you want to connect with me, that would be great. Then sometimes I share things with my connections only. So if you get value out of what I post, please connect with me. I'm also the author of a book titled Engagement Fundraising, which we make available for free. And there are links provided in this so that if later on you want that, I mean, you can always buy it. All the money from it goes to charity anyway. But if you want that, you can always click the link and get the download or the audio book. And if you like a hard copy, then you'll probably just want to contact us at MarketSmart. I'm also the inventor of the Fundraising Report Card, which is a free visualization tool that helps you see your metrics, and it's really great for reporting to your board quarterly. And that's, again, it's 100% free. And I also invented the DAF widget, which is a powerful way to really increase the number and the value of DAF gifts that you get. And lastly, I work frequently with Dr. Russell James with regard to my company's system, but also I'll be releasing for him all of his new research, which is coming out in the fall. So look out for that. And if you know who Dr. Russell James is, he's the foremost researcher in the field, and I'll be helping to spread the word about all his new findings. Now, MarketSmart is a done-for-you software and service firm, and we help essentially do what we're going to talk about today, and we do it with a 10-to-1 ROI offer. So if your organization tries it and you don't get 10-to-1 ROI, we give you your money back. It's never happened yet that we've had to do that because we always hit our numbers, but maybe someday that would happen and we'd have to give it back. The whole goal of what we try to do is to help fundraisers be the best they can be. And so that kind of leads me to give you just a little bit of a warning, is that today's webinar is a little bit more of a select group. We promoted it in a little more segmented way. And it's also, it could be construed to be a bit of a sales pitch, you know, because, well, we're really one of the few, if not the only firms that really focuses on automation for major gift fundraising. So it's going to be very hard for me to not talk about what MarketSmart does. And usually, I mean, we've provided over 100 webinars in the past few years, and we provide tons of content that's totally for free and is not sales or marketing oriented. It's just content. But this one is going to have a hint of sales or marketing in it. So if that rubs you the wrong way, I'm kind of just waving the flag right now saying that you might not want to continue attending. Maybe, so I'm warning you. And if that rubs you the wrong way, you might want to just bounce at this point. So, all right. Having said that, little housekeeping is that the recording and the slides will be sent to everybody. Even if you have to leave, you'll get it. Or if you have friends who registered, but they couldn't attend, we will send that out to them. And I'm going to hold all the questions until the end of the presentation. My marketing manager, Tricia, it will be monitoring people who raise their hands or try to chat and have questions and such. So without further ado, what we're going to talk about today is we're going to help you think about why you might want to consider automation and think about what you can automate. And then I want to go into the 3 types of automation that exist. And I'm gonna give you a recommendation of where I think that you should focus among those three types of automation. Once we pass that, I'm going to show you where you should start. So I'm going to talk more about that recommendation, and then I'm going to give away a bunch of secrets, really, that we've learned over the past 10 years, 12 years, really, of doing this. And then I'm going to move into a case study to show you the kind of ROI that you can expect. And then I'll do a quick promo about what we really do at MarketSmart to help you see how it can be put together to great effect. After that, I'll go into questions and answers. And then when you leave the webinar, there will be a survey. So you could give me feedback, please, about the presentation and where you reside in the consideration process for considering doing this kind of thing. All right. So with that, why should you consider automation? I mean, the answer is really pretty basic. It's no secret that when technology gets involved, people save money. They save time. They're more productive and efficient. They're effective. They get better ROI. And in fact, they reduce employee turnover, and they combat the myth of people often believe that if you employ technology, that means you're going to need to shed jobs, right? So I think that was true, like maybe when the automobile came out, for instance, then you've got horses needed horseshoes. So then horseshoe makers had jobs, right? But then the car comes, people aren't using horses as much. The horseshoe makers don't have a job. They have to do something else. But generally, every time technology comes around, it only increases the need for more jobs, sometimes different jobs, but still more jobs. So I don't want you to be afraid of technology for that reason. It is a myth that it will take away jobs. In fact, the idea of technology is to make you more effective and help you be the fundraiser you really want to be. That's climate change as a reason of why you should consider automation. The term that I came up with for this is fundraising climate change, and I put that in my book like years ago. This is a big problem, and I'm going to show you some research that actually just came out a couple of weeks ago. It's from the Lilly School, and it's a July report here. And again, when you get the slides, you'll be able to click on the link and see the full report. But what's interesting about this is that in all socio-demographic groups, I mean, every race and all that, over the past eight years, and this is the study ended in 2018. I don't know why it didn't go to 2020, but they found that what was once 2/3 of Americans giving to charity, it became more like half. Only half of people are giving to charity. And most of the reduction or the dropouts happened after the Great Recession. So this is not good news. Also, the average amount that people give has been going down. And that's been pulled down by the lower dollar donors. The major donors have been actually giving more. So that's a challenge to be thinking about. And this is really the donors down, dollars up is fundraising climate change. So I'm going to add more from my data that comes from our app, the fundraising report card, which again, we make it free for everybody so we can collect this kind of data. And there's about 8,500 organizations are using it now. It measures $93 billion in fundraising revenue. And what we're seeing is that retained revenue from year to year keeps going down. I used the same years, by the way, as that other study. And the number of donors that are retained essentially has been going down. First-time donor retention has been essentially going down. Reactivated donor retention is going down, and repeat donor retention is going down. And I don't mean to cause anybody some anxiety attack today. I'm just trying to give you the proof and the reason why you need to consider automating. So an interesting way to look at this, and this is all available on our benchmarks page at the fundraising report card, is that low dollar donors have worse retention rates and lower lifetime values than higher value donors, higher dollar donors, I should say. An easy way to look at this is with these blue circles. I mean, you're looking at an average donation of $26 at the low end to, for the over $5,000 donors, you're looking at $33,000 as the average. The retention rate is half for the lower dollar donors. You're 19% compared to 38%. And then the lifetime value is just off the charts. So what this means or translates into is that about 0.75%, meaning under 1% of an organization's donor base, on average, we've calculated, make up 72% of all of your revenue. You can find out your 80-20, if you will, or 72.74. If you go to the fundraising report card and drag and drop your data in there, it's only needs 3 data points. It's a simple poll. And again, it's free. It'll analyze everything for you. So people usually are surprised when they hear that, but that's the truth. And donors giving under $100, they make up 77% of the people that give, but it's only 5.9% of all the revenue that charities get. So this is focusing on the lower dollar donors and using the traditional methods for fundraising are what I call populist fundraising. That's where you try to get a few bucks from everybody. And it's usually employing fairly interruptive techniques that don't ask for permission. In fact, people will often rent lists and just essentially cold call on people who've given to similar organizations and such. I feel this is hitting a point of diminishing returns, if not worse. In fact, I'll get into this in a minute, but it's also very expensive and the ROI is not very good. I don't know the answer to it because we're a major gifts marketing firm. I'm not an acquisition firm. So I don't know what to do about it, but I'm just pointing out that it exists. And plus the costs keep increasing, especially with regard to postage and printing and paper and things like that. Now, having said all this, interestingly, the total amount that people have been giving, the total amount that's been generated, by charities across the board has continued to go up. It just seems to mirror the GDP, which grows at about 2% a year. And last year was the biggest year ever, $471 billion given to charity. It just keeps going up. And the reason, this donors down, dollars up, it's been happening for a long time. People are noticing it. I think that a lot of the reason for it is that trust has been diminished among the donor base. I think that people are tired of getting the traditional types of fundraising, and as the wealthier people, they don't really get it. They don't get those kinds of communications. They're in caseloads and they're treated differently. So their giving keeps going up, and they're where most of the revenue comes from anyway. And I've always thought this is the case, but in fact, this study agrees and says that trust is going down. I don't like the way they described that they measured trust. So I went and I looked in another area. There's the Edelman Trust Barometer, which is they study trust globally, and in the non-government NGO sector, nonprofits. And they found during the same time period that the drop in trust in the US was down 9%. But interestingly, among the informed public, which I think is more likely to be a donor base, is dropping at twice that rate. So, and even worse, as if I'm piling on here, is that the trust in business, private sector business, has now, for the past couple of years at least, exceeded trust in non-government organizations. This is fascinating to me. I never thought I would see that day, but it is here. And what the folks at Giving USA say is that giving's increasing because larger gifts for richer donors and smaller mid-level donors are slowly but surely disappearing. And O'Brien over at Network for Good says nonprofits are being challenged by these major political, demographic, economic changes that are outside of their control, and they got to find ways to adapt. That's what this webinar is really about. It's about helping you learn how you could do more and raise more with less. And the answer to that is by leveraging technology, of course. So let's take a look back. And for those of you who remember Blockbuster, I mean, I used to love going there and taking my kids, and sometimes half the experience of watching a movie at night was just to go to Blockbuster and look at all the movies that they had in the rows and the shelves. But, Blockbuster had 9,000 stores at one point in 2004, but today they have one. I mean, just one store. There it is, right? So back when they were really popular, I mean, at their peak, they had 85,000 employees, $6 billion in revenue, and that comes out to $70,000 per employee, revenue per employee. The thing is that technology came, and when streaming became available, Netflix really took over. And at 1/10 the number of employees, they generate $20 billion in revenue, which is a $2.3 million per employee compared to $70,000 per employee. So this is just an example. Of course, they're in the communications business, and so are you, but it's a different kind of communications. But technology was the key to that success. And I think the nonprofit sector is a little bit behind the private sector, honestly, with regard to adaptation of technology for purposes of reducing costs and building efficiencies. So what I'm trying to say is that automation is the technology that I believe is the key to cost-effective communications. And like I said, after all, you are in the communications business. That's most of what you do, is communicate with supporters. Now, when it comes to communications technologies, the most popular kind of technology that came about, and this started in 2005, and I was an early adopter of this, using a company called HubSpot way back then. There are hundreds now, I mean, this doesn't even show them all, hundreds of companies that have marketing automation software. If you have Salesforce, you probably could use Pardot. And I don't know what are all the others that you might be using. In fact, many nonprofits will sort of use the marketing automation tools that are available with the existing technologies that they have. For instance, they might have an event management software, and they'll use automation email for the purposes of communicating with event attendees and registrants and such. It's a clunky way to go, but I get it because, well, you got the technology, maybe you should use it. The thing is that there are certain keys to effective marketing communications, and these are them. I mean, you've got to the more you do of this, the better your marketing will be. But not all of those technologies really, especially if they're embedded with another kind of software, it's not a specialty, it's not a singular specialty of the software, then you're kind of getting an add-on, and it may not produce these keys for effective marketing. This is where I always tell folks, my dad used to say to me that, tools like email are like hammers. I mean, a hammer is a tool, and you can either build stuff, great stuff with tools, or you can break stuff. You can harm things with tools. So you got to be careful about how you use tools. Just because you have them doesn't mean that you get the result. It's not about activities and what you use. It's about the outcomes that you gain from them. So think about that, because in the end, if you're in major gifts, even mid-level legacy giving, it's all about relationships. And relationships are built on a foundation whose cornerstone is trust, right? Without trust in the cornerstone, in the foundation of relationships, really nothing happens. And trust is something that builds very slowly, but is lost very quickly and very hard to repair. So think of it as pulling that cornerstone out of this foundation and things crumble. It's going to be very hard to get that foundation back to the way it was. So think about that as you're using any kind of software where the promise is to get you better results, but you got to always think about, how does this apply, or how does this either increase or diminish the trust that your supporters have put in you? So, all right, let's move on to the 3 types of automation that you will become familiar with in this webinar, but people in your office will talk about automation sometimes, and you'll want to think about, especially in email automation, you'll want to think about these 3 categories so that you can understand where to place things and the value they provide. I call them basic, mid-level, and high-level automation, right? So basic is what you get out of pretty much any software where it's an add-on. And you may have this in your CRM or your event software and such. These are like set it and forget it one-off emails. In fact, in using Zoom, in order to set up this webinar, we have an automated email for registrants, and we set it, we forget it, everybody gets the same email after they register. These are like autoresponders and thank you emails, maybe supplying giving receipts to your supporters. So that's the basic stuff. I mean, you can get that almost anywhere, and it's fairly unpersonalized, if you will. It doesn't provide that much value to the donor, but maybe to you, because that way you don't have to type hundreds of emails, right? So then there's mid-level, which includes everything I just talked about at the basic level, but it also has some degree of increased personalization. It may allow you to do some simple drip sequences, which are triggered, so to speak, by certain events, if you will. And it also might give you some metrics, some reporting metrics, so that you can understand how the sequence is performing. So that covers basic and mid-level. These 2 are usually used to focus on the low dollar gift fundraising efforts. These are efforts that are more focused on cash, meaning credit cards mostly, maybe checks and things like that, but usually it's online. And that's not necessarily the best place to be using automation, but it's the easiest, and it will save people a lot of time, especially in-house. There's the other area is the high-level automation, which is helpful for focusing on major gifts of assets, including legacy gifts, and also in part for supporting mid-level donors. So this kind of automation does a lot. Of course, it's a lot more sophisticated and can include automatic or tools to help you build landing pages and microsites, or build forms that people could fill out to download content or gain access. It'll include the ability to segment lists automatically and get really super specific with individual segments of your donor base. It can include massive degrees of sophisticated personalization. And even once people click on an email or they fill out a form or they do something online, they can get different experiences and get different pages based on their profile in your database. It can be used for creating complex workflows of different kinds of emails for different kinds of people. And so on and so forth. There's even scoring opportunities, so you can gauge interest and kind of rank donors based on how much they engage. And that helps to prioritize who you should reach out to, because it's always better to reach out to people when they're deeply engaged rather than like 6 months after they downloaded a report, so to speak. So when it comes to marketing automation and email, we really recommend that you focus on the higher level of sophistication for this. It's focusing on assets and not cash. I'm not saying you shouldn't help acquire new donors. You've got to acquire new donors. I just personally have found that we can acquire new major donors where their first gifts are quite substantial, just as easily, and maybe sometimes even easier than acquire, and at lower cost than acquiring low dollar donors, especially through direct mail and such. Plus, the more they give, remember they retain at double the rate, double the retention rate. So don't forget about this, what is today 72/0.74, not the 80-20 rule anymore. So this webinar is really, and it said it in the name of the webinar, is focused more on the high level for helping you generate more major gifts and legacy gifts and moving the mid-level donors up. The idea is to help you understand how you can engage major donor prospects with automation so that you can assign properly populated caseloads, if you will. And in the end, what we want to do is we want to make you and your team much more effective and efficient, because we're removing with the automation the mundane and tedious and time-consuming tasks that your best fundraisers, top fundraisers seeking major gifts are really not that good at and not that interested in doing. The idea is to help them land more meetings and engage with more wealthy, philanthropic-minded people and meet with them and build relationships and trust, and take away from them all the other things that they really don't like doing anyway. So along those lines, where major gift staff really excel is in, like I just said, in meeting with people and building that bridge for philanthropic giving. The things they don't like, and I'm assuming many of you are out there, hopefully you agree, is you don't like being overworked doing tedious tasks. Sometimes I might even dare say that they're beneath you, they're more administrative, and you don't want to attend meetings unless they're with donors. You don't like being dragged into helping out with events, which all that makes you feel undervalued and unappreciated. And you especially don't like going on wild goose chases to meet with, or to try to meet with, donors that don't even want your outreach. So all of that causes wild goose chases as a result of false positives. And it's basically costing your organization money, because time is money. Now, I funded a study on this, but I won't use our study findings. They're pretty much the same as this from Ruffalo Noel Levitz. They asked what percent of newly assigned prospects fundraisers feel are truly qualified, and what they found was it was only about a third. Only about a third. Now, I was talking to a guy named Jim Langley, who's really kind of famous or popular in the fundraising world, and he thought that sounded high these days. He thinks it's more like 25%. But that's not really good news, because that means 2/3 of your gift officers' time is spent on wild goose chases, and not good. There's other data points in this report that show that gift officers feel that the wealth ratings are not as good as we would hope. And these folks admit that most of what they're doing to stay engaged with donors is through sending emails, and they do it manually, which takes a lot of time. And half didn't spend enough time on solicitation, not enough time on qualification, and they get frustrated because they spend so much time on setting up these qualification visits when they would prefer, frankly, to have qualified donors on their caseload rather than them doing the qualification. So this all points to the fact that it's again, there's problems in the sector that can be rectified with using automation to help support these folks. So these are the areas. Yeah, they want to stay engaged, spend enough time, or spend less time on qualification, and let the technology kind of do that for them, and more time on solicitation. So it's really interesting. It's qualification and cultivation are where the money kind of happens. Identification is important, but there may be really too much emphasis on prospect identification and not enough on qualification and cultivation. And this is what's resulting in those false positives. I mean, if you just take a prospect identification list and then you try to meet with people, you're going to end up with a lot of false positives and a lot of wasted money. You got to do the qualification and the cultivation step. And you can do this with what we call tech-enabled donor discovery, which scales your qualification efforts. Okay, so I'm going to jump forward really here and start showing you some examples of automated emails that are created thanks to a system, you know, a technology system. It happens to be ours. So here's one that's just, you notice it's very simple, and it's just thank you. This is the most simple kind. It's just thanking someone. And then the fundraiser, in this case, got a response. Although it was an automated email, it was, she got a response, and it was a nice response. And she even said, you know what, your message is so good that your mother brought you up right. Of course, we know it's a good message because we've tested it, and with hundreds of customers and, you know, thousands of users and millions of donors receiving these, we get the data. I'm not saying that gift officers don't know how to write messages, but they don't have the data to improve on them. But with marketing automation, you can collect the data to understand how to write these things so they're better. Here's another one, which I'm going to break apart. It's a little more sophisticated. Of course, it's got a personalized salutation, a one-to-one, you know, signature, if you will, and you can even make that different for different gift officers around the country or world. You're going to want to personalize. So if supporters have told you certain things in the past, it's important to reflect on that and remember them and show them that you heard them. And then you're going to want to create a way for them to engage further. So this is the call to action. You always want them to click to be able to do something else. And you want it to be so that if they hit respond, you know, reply, it goes back to you, the fundraiser, not to the machine, if you will. Then you can carry on the dialogue. All right, so here's another one that has a different kind of offer. We've found that offering videos is one of the best ways to create engagement. And just as an example, and this is a good one, but we see this all the time, is the open rates and the click-through rates are just exponentially greater than what you get with mass email, and it makes sense. A last one I'm going to show you here is one where we recommend putting links in the email, and especially sometimes after the signature, whereby a supporter can set up a meeting with you on their own. and they just go to your calendar, they find the time that's available, and then they click and they place themselves on your calendar. Now, we started this when we were piloting it. One of them was at a college. They're kind of like MIT, really smart engineering school. And we heard from the fundraiser that somebody had put themselves on his calendar, and he was kind of a little bit like, 15 minutes I got to spend with this person. They're not even in our database. What happened was they saw the offer they came in through Facebook, so they weren't a major donor yet. But they got into the system. They clicked on his email, the automated email. They set up a time to talk to him, 15 minutes. And then what he found was that they wanted to talk to him about a $4.5 million estate. So this is good. This is good. This saved him a lot of time. He probably never would have found that. Maybe the estate would have happened anyway, maybe, but at least this way he got to talk to him. So the whole idea is to try and scale your operation and really make one person perform like 9 and get them hot donor prospect leads, cultivate the rest that are not hot yet, bring them from warm to hot, and then see where they click so that they self-prioritize when they're ready for outreach. This helps also you further qualify them, because different types of clicks, like if they're clicking on sponsoring or funding a scholarship or endowing a chair or something, that's a better click than if they're just watching a video. So you want to score those differently. And you're going to want to include things that will, like links that will help people set their own appointments for you, so you don't have to chase after them. They're coming to you. This also, I'm not going to read over all this, but the bottom line is that this helps you retain your best A players and also attract A players, because then they're not doing the work that they don't want to do. Instead, they're only doing the work that they love to do. So, all right, so we're like a little more than halfway through this. We covered the why you should consider it, what you can automate, the 3 types of automation, and my recommendation for where you should start, of course, in the major and legacy gift area, mid-level gifts too. So now I'm going to give you a few secrets to success, whether you ever consider working with us or you try and do it in-house. It's fine. Take these secrets for yourself. We'll go through a case study, a quick promo about how we use the system, and then we'll do Q&A. So, all right. This isn't really top secret. I mean, it was until right now, I guess, giving it away now. So I see a lot of talk, and I hear about it when we engage with customers. Their marketing departments are usually, they get really enamored by the thought of these donor journeys, right? And they like to talk about, well, we have this technology and we can create these predetermined donor journeys. So that stuff doesn't work. It's a lot of thought for not a lot of lift. And unfortunately, I learned that the hard way 10 years ago, and we kept pounding at it, because that's the promise of marketing automation tech, is that you should create these donor journeys and all that. And that's cool for the private sector, and it's even maybe okay for the low dollar donors, but it doesn't work in major gift fundraising. And it looks like this. When you plan it all out, it's really it's a mind scramble, if you will. But the reason why it doesn't work is because, and this is that study that I funded on major gift benchmarks, which is we can send you the link to it if you ask us. It's free, again, like everything almost. The time it takes from prospect identification to close a gift is really 1 to several years. It's a long time, much longer than the marketing automation software companies are familiar with. And they recommend these kinds of donor journeys, and that works in the private sector, where maybe closing a deal is 6 months at most. But in fundraising, especially major gift fundraising, what you're looking at is not weeks or months for decisions to be made. You're really looking at months or years. And because of the timeline, it makes it impossible to predict and to understand what kind of information and emails you should be sending to people, even if you program triggers into it. Because the thing is that people's lives change tremendously. They may be taking care of their mom in the hospital for a while, and then so they're not ready for you. Or maybe they are waiting for a liquidity event to happen with their business. This could take a year, it could take 3 years. So this is the top reason why donor journeys are just not appropriate for this type of marketing. At least if you're aiming to raise money from major donors using email automation. So I hope that makes sense. The other thing is that it's all about trust. So as you're creating these kinds of email efforts, these automations, you should have in the back of your mind that everything that you write you should ask yourself, is this going to move or help the donor move themselves forward because they're gaining trust in you as an individual and your organization? So the way to do that, here's our internal checklist for these kinds of emails is, number one, it should be text only. It should not look like marketing. It cannot be pretty, and it's not creative, artsy time. This is like, these emails should be what you would write if only you had the data to know what really worked, and if you had the time to craft them. Hundreds and sometimes thousands individually that are personalized. So they should be text only. They should be real and sound like they're from a real person, because they're coming from you. They're just automated, and they should sound genuine and authentic. They should be colloquial. If your organization has these like messaging guidelines and they sound very stale and stodgy, don't do that. It's maybe your marketing team, honestly, they probably shouldn't do that either. But it should be warm and colloquial. It should be relevant. It should be based on what donors have told you in the past and where they've clicked, so that it's relevant to them. And definitely don't use jargon. Make it really easy to read, almost kind of design it to make it easy for them to scan. Use bolding, use italics. Provide an offer. Make sure you include a link in there that is an offer of value. And make sure that if they want, they can hit reply and respond to you. And then the last thing is incorporate incorporate a calendar link so they can set themselves up on your calendar to have a chat. Last thing is, never, ever, 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 did I say never? Ask for money especially in automated emails. And generally, if you're trying to build trust among wealthy major donor prospects, the last thing you want to do is ask them for money via email, unless it's an emergency. The reason is because you will leave money on the table. You don't want $1,000 or even $5,000 from a lot of these folks. You want 50,000, 100,000, and a legacy gift. So maybe those numbers are different for your organization. If you're a smaller organization, you don't have that many wealthy people, but the idea is still the same. If you ask for money, you'll diminish the trust. It's not the right way to go for people at that level. So those are my top tips there. Remember that this isn't actually, although it's called marketing automation by the software companies that supply it, it's really not. And I wrote a white paper that's called fundraising automation. If you Google fundraising automation, I'm the only person who uses that term because I made it up. So I made up a lot of terms for the sector, but we call it fundraising automation, really. Moving on to the question of like, can you afford this? Well, I feel that the question is more, can you afford not to do it? We've just had so many people over the years who have seen the success, and at big organizations and little ones. So in thinking about automation, it cuts costs and it raises more money. So this one, of course, she had written this when she had just gotten started and had already achieved 60-to-1 ROI. So with that, I'm going to go into a little bit of a deeper dive on a case study fairly quickly, honestly, is showing you that at this small college in Kansas, their total giving, and the yellow represents people who are engaged with automation over a period of time, several years actually. The people who are engaged properly with this kind of automation, and by the way, they only have 2 major gift fundraisers, so they don't have a lot. Like, they need the automation for thousands of people, and they ended up getting 1,100% increase in the average total gift. Now, most of that comes from the high dollar donors, but if you're concerned about how this kind of thing can affect the low dollar and mid-level, there's increases there too. It's just, you're not going to be able to really, it doesn't make a big dent in your budget if you focus automation on lower dollar donors. I mean, it's great. It's a 253% increase, but that's kind of a vanity metric. What you really want is hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know? So this is true across the board. I mean, there's no metric where it doesn't help. It helps with upgrading, whereby the average amount that upgraded donors give is increased across the board. The percent of people who increased their giving or upgraded was increased across the board. The retention rates over the years for every donor giving dollar category increased across the board quite substantially in the low dollar donor arena. And reactivations, a greater percentage of people reactivated as a result. And remember, the funny thing is, these kinds of emails never ask for money. They just engage. So also the average amount that reactivated donors gave was substantially more. But where you really get the most bang for your buck is in building these kinds of pipelines for gift officers to build caseloads. So, and especially for stewardship teams. I mean, look, this little college, we uncovered 171 legacy gifts they didn't know about, thanks to the automation system. So this is pretty powerful, especially because their legacy gifts are over, if I remember, $110,000 on average, which is very high. So I won't read you all of this, but basically what this is we're looking at their pipelines and major donors and legacy donors and where they fit in the consideration continuum according to them, by the way. This isn't from predictive analytics or anything. This is according to the donors, thanks to the system. And as a result of all that, the key is that in the first year, they got a great return, but over several years, we're projecting their return to be over $101 for every dollar invested. It's pretty substantial. So having said all that, that kind of concludes the presentation. And now, if you don't want to know what MarketSmart actually does and get a real sales pitch, it's not really a pitch, but I'm going to show you what MarketSmart does at a very, very high level. And then we'll go into the question and answer session. So thanks for hanging for so long. All right. So it's kind of all about, there's sort of an over-reliance in my opinion. I found that in prospect identification, and that report from Ruffalo and Noel Levitz really kind of hits it on the head too. So what happens is you usually end up with too many prospects. I mean, there's more that are wealthy than you can effectively manage. So when you get those lists, you're gonna have a lot, which is good. It's a good thing. But the problem is that a lot of it's going to go unused. It'll kind of sit on a shelf. And then like the next year comes around and they ask you to do it again, update it. And it's like, well, I barely used it last time, and the reason why in some cases, not every case, I mean, some people really use this stuff effectively, but when they reach out to the supporters, they're not ready. That's the big problem. They're not ready. So it's not that they don't want to give. In most cases, it's just they're not ready. So if they're not ready, that's a problem for you, because your time is money. You want to be in there and engage deeply when they're ready. Of course, to build a relationship with you and take it to the next level where they're in your caseload. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is you don't really necessarily need more information. What you want and need is more meetings, meaningful meetings, not more data. You want to be the fundraiser you always hoped you could be. And that's not by chasing wild geese and finding false positives. So this brings me to a focus on prospect qualification, which can happen through cultivation, which is done through automation. A lot of TION words. But with prospect qualification using automation in the right kind of system, you don't only find out who, it's not about identification, but why. So you want to understand, and it's interesting because donors will actually engage with this stuff and tell you more about themselves through engagement online these days than they will in a first meeting with you individually. It's not your fault. It's just that people don't trust people. And people's trust, they're on guard these days. So they trust your mission, though, and they engage with your mission online in the privacy of their own home at their time frame, when it's at their pleasure. They will tell you why they care and where is that intersection in their life story and your cause. They'll also tell you how passionate they are compared to other charities and what are their interests. Who influenced them to care? Was it a doctor, a nurse, a volunteer, a professor? Where are they in the consideration continuum? And are they considering giving assets, or is it cash? Because we want assets, of course, and legacy gifts. And if they're interested in that, do they want information or do they want to meet? And then a whole bunch of other data points that you can't buy. So think of this as supplementing the kind of data that you can buy with data that comes directly from the donor, especially things like, do they ever have children? You can't buy that data point. Do they have a donor advised fund? They'll tell you that, but you can't buy it. So this gives you a better view of the donor, and it also helps them lean in further and closer to an individual relationship with you. And this is like prospect qualification on steroids through technology that reduces the number of wild goose chases you go on and saves you time, which is your organization's money. So our system uses a survey to populate the system. It's we liken it to tech-enabled donor discovery. So we're using technology to perform a lot of the donor discovery, and that helps spawn the emails that go out to supporters and helps make those emails unbelievably relevant and personalized and timely. We also recommend putting a cookie on each donor's browser so that you can see where they're clicking later as they engage with your web pages. Now, all of this, they have to opt in to do this and give you permission for all this. We get generally 75 to 85% of the people who engage end up opting in for this kind of deeper relationship. If they don't opt in, I mean, that's okay. We still get plenty, hundreds and thousands of people to opt in. So then the cultivation begins, and as time goes by through months and years, people move themselves through this consideration continuum until such time that they essentially say that they're ready by putting themselves on your calendar or responding to you or being prioritized by our algorithm because they're showing that they are ready. They clicked on bequest language or they clicked on the DAF widget in order to give money from their donor advised fund or something like that. So the prioritization and the notifications that you get help you understand that now is the time to reach out and meet with this individual. So the whole idea is to zero in on people who are ready to meet with you now and to cultivate all the others that aren't ready effortlessly through automation, and then also to help migrate the mid-level donors up. So the return on investment is usually 10 to 1 in the first year and 100 to 1 over time. And that's why we're not afraid to guarantee 10 to 1 early in the engagement within the first year. There are some strings attached to that, which we could talk about if you're ever interested. But something that there are no strings attached to is that if you're even curious about this, because we don't offer this to everybody. There are some organizations that aren't qualified. I mean, we'll sell them the system, but we won't give them the 10 to 1 offer because their data is not good enough, or they've already like spammed their donor base to death, so to speak. But we will provide an opportunity analysis for free where we analyze your transactional data and we marry it with our data. And then we make some predictions, some forecasts based on what we know is likely to happen from past donors in sectors similar to yours. So in the end, we'll present all this to you. It's quite dense and it's powerful to see this. In fact, dare I say, it's more than what you would get if you hired a consultant to do this kind of deep dive, but it's absolutely free. So, all right, with that, I've been talking long enough. I am going to open this up to questions and if anybody has any. So thank you very much for, by the way, for staying throughout the whole event. If you'd like to ask a question, or maybe I should ask Tricia if any came through. Oh, hold on, there's some in the chat. So let's see if there's any questions here that I can answer. And by the way, use the Q&A tool if you have any. And honestly, if there aren't any, then let's see here.
Hey, Greg, I didn't see any questions pop up yet, but we did get a great comment of amen on the donor journeys being an unskilled strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that almost with every new customer as their marketing department comes in with some kind of binder and rolls out this stuff of these donor journeys. And I'm like, wow. And it's usually, I don't know about ageism, reverse ageism, but it's like a 27-year-old, you know, and I'm like, what do you know about how to really speak to a 74-year-old widow or widower about the meaning of life and how they're going to find that meaning of life through philanthropy? I mean, you better really know how to write that and what to say, or you're going to tick them off. And what I see in those plans is usually very transactional, and they usually almost always ask for money all the time. So that, as I mentioned before, is really like the worst way to go. So, okay, Linda, thank you for asking a question, getting the ball rolling. Is, do we have experience? Yes, we work with a lot of organizations in Canada, mostly larger ones. But yes, we're familiar with all the rules and the laws and the differences between the US and Canada. And, you know, in fact, I have my good friend, I don't know if you know David Love, he used to work in different nature organizations. If you haven't gotten his book, it's a great book, but he's pretty famous, I think, as a fundraiser in Canada. And I think he mentioned me in the book. In fact, he did. All right, so do I have a preferred calendar link service? Well, we use Calendly. Yeah, that's the one that we use with our system for our customers. So if you have that, that's great. Then you get even a better integration, but that's the one that we use too. And Linda, yeah, so you know David, shouldn't we all know David? Yeah, we all should know David. And his book is great. He's not trying to make money from it. It's just he's retired. So he's trying to give away all of his best information.
All right, I've got a couple of more questions for you.
Oh, okay.
On the other side,
we the chat tool. What is the best way to get leadership on board? Yeah, so that's a great question, Jenny. That's why we do the opportunity analysis. Sometimes just sending them our content, like my book, more so the fundraising automation white paper is probably shorter and better than my book for that reason. But if we could run your data, we'll do the opportunity analysis for you and show it to your leadership. It's unquestionable and undeniable once they see that sort of thing. I don't know if we've ever not had someone go forward after seeing, no, it's about 90%, I think. So, okay, there's another question. So Jenny, we'd love to help you out with that. Lisa, we are a small organization with about 3,000 in our database. Would the system be appropriate? Well, it depends. I sound like such a consultant when I say that, Lisa, but usually with such a small donor base, it's not going to work because you won't have enough major donor prospects. If you're looking at 1 to 5% of your donor base is probably going to be wealthy. However, it also, I've seen the organization, we worked with one that only had 800 in their donor base, but they were very wealthy people, and it was a slam dunk. So it did work. So that's another one. We could do an opportunity analysis for you. You will also want to look at your Facebook. Like if you have 100,000 or 50,000 Facebook supporters and LinkedIn followers and Twitter followers, you can use the system. It's just that you'll use social media more than email or direct mail. I thank you all for joining us. Please consider taking the survey at the once this concludes, and hope to meet all of you individually at some point if you're interested. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.